Hi, I'm Mr. Simons, and in this video we're going to be looking at economic growth. In particular, we're going to introduce you to the concept, and we're also going to look at the difference between nominal and real GDP. Very important. Let's get started. A good place to start is to define economic growth. And in terms of looking at that, I find that a really excellent definition of economic growth has three parts. The first part is that economic growth is an increase in an economy's productive capacity. What does this mean? Good question. So that we're looking at more and more output can be produced when economic growth goes up. The second part of our definition is that economic growth is measured by changes in real GDP over time. We're going to go into this, but just be aware this word real. Real growth takes into account inflation, changes in price levels. The third part of our definition is the most important part, perhaps, is that by increasing economic growth, a country can have higher levels of income and higher living standards. So these three parts are very important when we're defining economic growth. So let's start by measuring economic growth, and this is part one. The key with economic growth is to calculate real GDP. Real GDP. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to know nominal or money GDP. And this just means the dollar amount of GDP. So this could be, it's just the dollar amount of GDP. But we need to go a step further. We need to adjust nominal GDP for changes in prices. So we have to consider inflation, the changes in prices to get real GDP. So then if we are trying to calculate real GDP, we start with nominal GDP, we incorporate inflation, and we get real GDP. What does this look like? I'm so glad you asked. Now, the CPI, the 100 over CPI, the CPI is what's known as the Consumer Price Index, and this is our main measure of inflation in an economy. So we just plug in the numbers. Money GDP times 100 over CPI will give us real gross domestic product. Now, I'm not going to leave you with just that. Let's do an example. Look at this one here. It says calculate real GDP for year 2. Okay, let's consider year 2. So what we're going to do is we're now going to apply the formula. So you can see we just plug in the numbers into the formula. Year 2 nominal GDP is 660, and then we know that the CPI is 110. And then we just go through the process to get the answer. Make sure you always put down the units. So now let's look at measuring economic growth part 2. What we're going to do is, so we can figure out nominal GDP, and we've also got real GDP, but how do we get economic growth? How do we compare rates of economic growth? All we need to do is to set up another formula. So this is what it looks like. So what we've got is we've got real GDP in year 2 minus real GDP the year before that over real GDP in that same year before that times 100. So there's a way we can simplify this further. So we can say that year 2 is the current year and then year 1 is the previous year. So we're able to compare economic growth between years using this formula. But the key is we have to have real GDP. Okay, so in this video we've talked about economic growth, what it is, and a little bit about nominal and real GDP. There's plenty more on this channel, so subscribe, leave us a comment, check out some of the other videos. Thanks for watching.